Welcome to our first century. We're your hosts, Ty and Krista. Bridges do more than just connect one place to another. They tell a story. They stand as testaments to engineering, resilience, and the people who build them. And if you've driven through North Carolina, chances are you've crossed a bridge built by T.A. Loving Company. From spanning the inlets of the Outer Banks to crossing historic rivers, bridges have been at the heart of T.A. Loving Company's work since the very beginning.
Today, we're diving into the history of bridge building at T.A. Loving Company, how it started with a single contract in the 1920s and grew into a legacy that has shaped the landscape of North Carolina and beyond. We'll hear from Stephen Salter, General Superintendent for Civil Infrastructure, and Barry Reeves, a retired bridge builder with decades of experience. They'll share stories of iconic projects, the challenges of working in extreme conditions, and what it means to drive across a bridge knowing they had a hand in its construction. With that, let's dive in. So thank you, Stephen and Barry, for joining us today. Stephen, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us about what brought you to T.A. Loving Company and a little bit about your experience being here over the years?
Yeah. So what brought me to the company? I got graduated from East Carolina in December of '92, and I pretty well just bummed around Greenville doing some odd jobs until middle of the summer when I completely ran out of money and had to move back home, and I knew that was not going to be a long-term fix. So I had a friend of mine who was working with the company at the time, and they were looking for a surveyor helper. And when that came available, I went in and filled out an application, and the application said surveyor helper / laborer. And it was way more on the laborer end than it was the surveyor helper. But I needed a job. That's really what brought me. I needed a job. It was an opportunity, and the company gave me the opportunity.
And that was paper applications, right?
Oh, yeah. It was paper applications. It was interview right at the moment. We did do drug testing, so we got sent to get drug tested. You came back, started to work the following. Actually, that was right before Thanksgiving in November of '93, and I think I started working the Monday after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So
you started as hopefully a surveyor, but more on the laborer side. What was the trajectory of your career from there?
Well, again, it was supposed to be a surveyor helper position, again, / laborer. When I interviewed from there, I just worked, did the best I could, tried to learn as much as I could, and worked my way up to foreman, assistant superintendent, general superintendent, and assistant VP, general superintendent now. So, so that's sort of how it went. It was a lot of long hours. We worked 40 hours was really a pipe dream. It was a lot of long hours, a lot of whatever it took to do. If they asked for volunteers, I tried to volunteer and learn as much as I could. I was lucky to be on the surveying end of it because I got to experience a lot of different things around the job sites that if I had been just locked into one particular spot, probably wouldn't have got that as early. But there was some good people that helped me along the way too. Ted LaCasio, who hired me, and Doug Johnson, who was there, hired me. And then got to meet a lot of the guys, after that.
We've talked a lot about how it's really a people business. We build things, but it requires people and relationships.
Yeah, a lot of really hardworking folks over the years that have come along that were really spent the time and kind of gave me the opportunity.
Yeah, that's what we talk a lot about that. But it's always interesting to hear everybody's story and the opportunity that was there, and then how you got the opportunity, but then you had to go do something. And it's like you said, it's a lot of hard work, a lot of hard hours, but it was a good path.
We talk about career paths and a lot of stuff now that wasn't discussed at all back then. It was, you just come in, and when they say go to work, you go to work. And if they say work over here, you go work over there. I mean, that's what you did. And so, again, it was, It was a lot of learning. Obviously, I came from a rural area, so I knew how to do a lot of different things growing up, which came into play, welding and building a lot of things, carpentry work, those sort of things you did as you grew up that helped out along the way. But really, it was a whole lot of learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you got an opportunity, but then you took advantage of the opportunity, right? And so your responsibility does not end when you get a job. That's where your responsibility begins.
Absolutely. I mean, the goal obviously is to have the opportunity and then to expound upon the opportunity to broaden your horizons and help the company as it goes. But, each opportunity is different for sure. And again, I was fortunate probably to be in that position of like, where I could experience a lot of things around the job.
Yeah, I think that is a key to being well-rounded. And being in that surveyor role, you just like you said, you get to touch so many parts of the job. And
yeah, and of course, my surveying experience was one class in college.
Yeah.
That's the
well, you
only
had to-
surveying experience I had. So
you figure it out.
right, that's
You
right.
know, it's
This
a
is
lot
what he
about-
did. This is what I'm doing, and then
Yeah.
you may tweak it in some direction
Yeah.
thereafter.
That's exactly right. Well, Barry, kind of the same question for you. What brought you to TA Loving Company, and then talk about that and your experience here.
Okay, I was I was fresh off the farm. I can tell you right fresh off the farm. But my dad built custom built homes, so I knew a little bit about carpenter work. But during that time, he just retired from building houses and stuff and bought a 110-acre farm. So he wanted to try farming, which he was good at farming. And well, I'd had enough of it. I was 21 years old, and I was still there. And I told my mom one day, I said, "Look, TA Loving is hiring down on the Emerald Bridge." I said, "I'm going to go see if I can get me a job with them." I said, "That $600 I made all year long wasn't going to cut it." So I told her, and she said, "Well, I'm glad you're going to do that, because if you didn't, as long as your daddy had some help, he would try it, keep trying it." I said, "I hate to." But she said, "No, don't worry. Maybe he'll go fishing then, like you ought to." So I went down there.
What year was that?
That was in 1970. They had just started the Emerald Bridge. And so I went down there, and I went there the next morning. It said from 7 to whatever, sign up. So when I got there, I said, wow, there was 27 people in line, and I was number 27. I was late, in other words. So
What time did you get there?
I got there probably about 7.
So
but
they
the
got
rest
there.
of them, yeah, and they were older carpenters and stuff like that. People that would have trade looking work, had their toolboxes on their shoulders and sitting beside them waiting for Paul Yunt. I know you've heard of him. He hired me, but he didn't hire me that day. I said, "I've stood here all this time, 27 people, and you ain't gonna hire me." He said, "No, I want you to come back tomorrow." I said, "Okay." So I showed up the next morning. He said, "Whoever don't show up this morning, you get their job."
Oh.
I said, "Oh, okay." Sure enough, a guy named Red Selby, been working with him 10 years, I guess, didn't show up. But he was out in the car asleep. So they put me on the wrecking scaffold. I know you've heard of that wrecking scaffold. And I was under there working, and they asked me what could I do, I said, first thing they asked me was, "Can you read a rule?" I said, "Well, sure, I can read a rule. My dad was a carpenter, and I helped him on houses and stuff." So I went under there and I worked about a half a day, and they give me the job of running the scaffold up on top. And I said, "I've never run one of these before." It had all those levers, and you had to keep it straight going down the bridge. And it had a conveyor system on it that was chained. It just rolled down here and let chain down. They'd hook up the plywood, whatever, bring it back and set it in the middle of the deck. That was my job then. So I worked at that, and I liked it pretty good. And they come up there and said, "Who was that said they could read a rule?" I said, "I can read a rule." He said, "Can you saw?" I said, "I can saw." What else can you do? I said, I don't know. What you want done? He said, we need somebody on the carpenter crew to do diaphragms. And so here I went. I didn't have a tool one, but I didn't need any tools, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I went on up there, and about a couple of days, I think I worked a couple of weeks, and my brother called. He was working in Florida. And I was making $2.15. And he called me, and I could make $9. And that was the difference in the pay back then in Florida. So I said, I'm gone. So what led me to come to TA11 was when I come back, I didn't like Florida. So when I come back, I met a girl, and her name was Donna, and that's who I'm married to now. About the time we got to dating good, her daddy, Alfred, was transferred to Suffolk, Virginia to do a bridge. She moved. So I said, we decided that I went up there 2 or 3 weekends. You know, my weekends were spent up there. And I said, well, I might as well. I said, we're going to get married, right? She said, yeah, we'll get married. I said, well, I need to get a job up here. You know, I'm going to get a job at TA11. I liked it pretty good. And that's what happened. I went up there, and there was Giles Trimble, and he hired me. And I worked there for 50 years, 2 months. I never lost my job, never got laid off, and never missed a paycheck. And went from job to job, and that's how I got there. And I raised a family and retired.
Yeah.
I've been to many a bridge, though. Whew. I've done a lot of things, but I enjoyed all of them.
Yeah.
I really did. And the people were good. And when I got there, about a week later, Wilson Twyford showed up. I didn't know him from nobody, you know. Come to find out he was my wife's brother-in-law.
Oh,
Well, I hadn't met him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was finishing a job, I think, in LaGrange or
Yeah.
somewhere like that.
Yeah.
And he'd come up there because Mr. Trimble had fired the superintendent right after I got there.
Okay.
And I seen Wilson. He took over the job at Suffolk in the Nasman River.
Oh, yeah.
Big project.
Yeah.
And when I got there, she had everybody from her family worked there. It was just family, you know, a lot of
Right.
family, uncles and cousins and brother-in-law. And so I said, well, I reckon this is the place for me.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting you bring that up because we've just concluded a podcast that's kind of talks about family and how many families have worked here and all the family influence within the company. It's interesting to hear it in the different areas.
And then they asked me, said, didn't you work with us before? That's when I see I worked in Emerald. I said, what were you doing? I said, I was doing diaphragms. He said, well, we got a place for you then. So he took me up there, and the hottest day it had to be 150. I'm down in a diaphragm hole.
Mm.
I didn't say I had a safety belt on, but we were on platforms. And if somebody said, hey, boy, I'm your uncle, I'm looking around. I know I don't have no family there, you know. And I look up, and it was Tommy Dowdy's daddy. He runs a crane. And I told him, I said, you know, Uncle of mine. He said, yeah, you don't like it, but I'm in your family. and it went on from there. I worked there. It was good atmosphere, just good working conditions.
Yeah.
It really was. I mean, I didn't say it was easy.
Yeah.
You had a certain amount you done every day. And
Yeah. But it definitely makes a difference to people you work with.
yeah, it sure
Yeah.
did. Yep.
so Stephen, Barry just mentioned he worked on a lot of bridges, and we know you have too. What's your first memory or first experience on working on a bridge?
Ooh, first experience working. Well, I will say this. Of course, I've worked on quite a few of them, not as many as Barry, obviously, but quite a few of them over the years. My first experience that I can really remember was the Monday I started working. Again, I think it was the Monday after Thanksgiving, so it would have been late November. And again, I grew up in a very rural area. I was outside all my life. Did a lot of hunting and fishing, those sort of things, and I thought I was pretty well prepared for the weather. But the first job I was on was the Wright Memorial job. That was in Currituck County. It's a 3-miler, crosses the Currituck Sound, and the wind blows there every day, all day. And in the wintertime, about middle 1st of November, it swings out of the northeast, and it blows northeast wind all the time. And that first Monday, I put on what I thought I'd be fine in wearing, and by about 9:30 that morning, I was freezing to death. And I was a long, hard day. But at the end of the day, I swore up and down I would never do that again. So I went and bought me some clothes, and I got prepared. And but you get out to work all day, and by 7:30, 8 o'clock, you're cold. It's going to be a long day.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that's really first thing I remember about working with TA11 was being prepared for the environment that you're working in is, and it changes dramatically from super cold to very, very hot, you know, depending on where you are and what you're doing and how the wind's blowing, whether it's rain, you know, all those things that go along with it. That environmental condition can change drastically.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the first thing I really remember about it. I remember it was a lot of long hours. I was driving about an hour and a half each way to work at that time. So I ended up, that was about to kill me because when you first start doing something like that, you're not used to it. After you get here working a while, you get used to making those long trips and drives. But when you first start, you're not. So I ended up sleeping on the floor at a friend of mine's apartment on the concrete floor for about a month.
Yikes.
Yeah.
It was basically just concrete floor. They had put industrial carpet down on it in the wintertime, and not much padding and not much warmth. But you throw it like a quilt down, you lay on it, and put another one over you, and you sleep, and that's what you meant to do. But that was interesting. That was always a little something hard to get used to, but we made it through it.
Yeah. Barry, you mentioned you've been on a lot of bridges in your career. What's the favorite project that just stands out?
I think my favorite project where I learn a lot, I had to do so many different things because back in the day, they might have a 3-year bridge here or a 2-year bridge there. And when you got through, like, I was working in New Bern, and Mr. Trimble called me up to West Norfolk. I know you've heard of it. And they always called it, everybody around there would called it the 8th wonder of the world. I said, well, yeah, I had never seen anything like that. You know, I remember, like I tell you, I hadn't been long working from Suffolk. And then we went to Greenville, and then we come back to there. And Mr. Trimble, he said, I want you to be up here in the morning. Well, I'm in New Bern. It's 3 o'clock that evening when I seen him. He said, you go ahead and go on up there, and I'll see you up there in the morning, and I'll send a truck after your trailer. We had a mobile home, and you moved it everywhere you went. I said, great day. So I went home, told Donna, my wife. I said, I got to leave the night, you know, and go up there. He had a hotel room.
Yeah.
So I left, and I went to the office the next morning, and he said, I want you to come on back here. I want to show you something. Son, he threw down a set of blueprints that was big as this table. It looked like French to me, you know, low water footers. The least concrete was in it was 400 yards. And I had to build it, and I had never built one before in my life. Seen nothing like it. Had to put falsework on it, hang timbers, and
Yeah.
so got through with that, and I built 33 of them,
Yeah.
one after the other, and you had to push the concrete out there on a barge with a tugboat.
Right.
And then the crane would hook and ladder, like I heard Sam talking about on,
Yeah.
and you hook and swing it, and then go back to shore and get 8 more yards and back again. So I got through with that, made it through that pretty good, and Mr. Trimble come to me one day, right when I was getting through with the last, thought I was going to get, just draw a fresh breath. He said, I want you to come up here and take the stems over. That was the columns.
Mm-hmm.
So I ain't never done any columns before in my life. He said, you'll learn it. So I did that, and then I come back and then set the girders. And then I went back up top and put all the drains on them. You got little plastic drains now that you put down. You've seen them, even with the top of the deck. The ones I had to pick up weighed 300 pounds apiece. Me and one helper.
Yeah.
And we had to cut steel out. You had to set it down and take and mark it out with crayon or whatever.
Right.
And cut it out with the torch and set it down in there and get it to grade, because they were going to pour. You had to pour every other day.
Yeah.
So I had to stay ahead. And them things were 6 foot long, the foot. So we had to pick it up and set it down in that hole, cut a hole in the deck, and set it down through. And that was challenging. Now, I'm going to tell you what the truth it was, but we made it through that too.
Yeah. And
it was just one thing to the other. Like the man that was building the abutments, he was getting pretty old. And he decided he was going to retire. Well, he'd been laying the scupper holes off and stuff on the abutments. They were big abutments. I'm talking about 12, 15 foot high. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Trimble come there. He said, why don't you go up there and see if you see what you can do. Mr. What's his name, whatever his name was, had retired. I'm thinking, whew, never seen that much wood, before. And he had about 8 or 10 men, but got that done too. So it was one thing after the other. I learned a lot. I think that I even had to run the tugboat when the tugboat operator quit. Yeah. And I think it took me 30 minutes the first time to get the tugboat away from the shore. But I didn't know how it worked, real good. But
well, it's like Stephen was saying earlier. There's something that's got to get done, and
you wanted to learn all you could, because when you looked up there and you seen the guy with the gold hat, really the guy that was in charge, you said, "Well, I want to be in his place." I want to take over when he's kind of old, and he might need some. But they hired people like that and taught you like that, so they could send you somewhere else and leave somebody there to finish the job. And we had plenty of work, always 2-3 years. And another thing good with that, when you had a 3-year job, you knew you could buy a new car. Yeah. Because you wore the other one out going back to see your parents, and stuff, Yeah. You could buy a new car and pay for it 36 months. That's all you could finance them for. But now you can finance them 72 months. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
it's definitely lots of opportunity for different types of learning. There's a whole big picture of things that have to be done, and just like you said, somebody's got to do it, and it's just a matter of if you have enough initiative to take charge and try to go learn. Yeah. Obviously, some years back too, things were not as, hate to say safety conscious, but we're not as there was not as much spotlight on it, so you had some more opportunities to try different things probably than you do now, without having the safety implications involved in it. You got on a piece of machinery, and if you wanted to learn it, they stuck you on there and said, well, here's what you want to do, and kind of got out of the way and let you try to go figure it out. And that's sort of probably not how things are going to work nowadays.
Yeah, it's a little different.
A lot more classes, a lot more liability comes along with teaching people that used to, it was sort of trial by fire. You got in there and you just tried it out to see what happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Just like when the crane operator didn't show up, somebody had to run it.
Somebody had to run the crane.
Yep.
Because you don't do anything
That's
on a bridge
exactly right.
without a crane.
Been there and done it. Had to send the crane operator home, had to get in the crane and run it. And now everybody has to be certified to do so, and all those other things.
And the first thing he'd say is, "Get out of the way."
Yeah.
Until I can learn this thing.
Watch out.
Yeah, that's right. It was. You could learn it. All you had to do is you just hinted that you wanted to learn it, and they would because they needed the help too.
Yeah. You brought up a good point. The thing about bridge work that a lot of folks don't know is a lot of times there's more effort put into building something that you're going to work off of to actually build the actual structure.
Yeah, trestle.
And people don't have a real appreciation for that.
Yeah.
And then the difficulties in well, how am I going to get concrete? And it's, you're going to bring it on a barge, and, it's the things you take for granted if you're building a job, a normal job with normal access. But bridge work's completely different. You have to have that knowledge base to be able to factor all that in.
It could be anything from trestle to the false work that you're using, those sort of things, because you take it all down and it goes away and it leaves whatever it is that you poured in place. And so, you're right. And everything is, most of the bridges we have done, obviously, are over water. So you don't have the ability to have land there to give you that aid. So you have to build it yourself.
Yeah.
Specialty tools, specialty things that go along with those, with that to make it work.
Yeah, it's a fascinating part of the business, part of the construction business.
It's one of those things where it gives you the opportunity to improvise a little bit, to come up with a different method or a different piece of equipment or whatever it is you have to build to make it work, that the other guy may or may not be doing that way.
The creativity that
Correct.
you can build into it. Yeah, you're right.
And you learn from them guys that had built it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the way they wanted it built. You know?
Right.
And you learned it safe way because you had a crane up on top of it,
Yeah.
You had to be right. And you're getting ready to pick up something that weighed 30 tons, 40 tons, swing around the side. It better hold up.
Things better be right.
It
like
better
you
be
said.
right, yeah.
Some of those things will spoil you too, because the first bridge I worked on was the Wright Memorial, of course, like we talked about. We had our own concrete plant on barge.
Yeah.
Oh.
So you could just bring the concrete to you. If you want to start pouring at a specific time, you just push the concrete plant out there, spud it down, and you started pouring. You didn't have to wait on trucks. You mixed it all yourself, you swung it up on the deck, got done, you pushed it into the hill.
Yeah. No order, no delivery.
That's right. It's all in-house. Call on the radio. That's right. Yeah.
So you all have built a lot of bridges and your work is visible. If you drive around Virginia or North Carolina, you can see the work that you've done. What's that like?
I think it's amazing because I like it because when I drive across, if I've got a friend with me or my grandyoungins, I can say, your pop worked on this, and I like to froze to death. You'd throw something in there that happened, and they'll say, well, that's what I want to do, And I'm thinking, yeah, it's a good job. It's, I raised a family with it. But the work, I don't mean this in a bad way, they don't work like we worked, the younger crowd, Things change. We worked, and if you needed to tote a piece of 4x8 plywood, you didn't have nobody to help you. You just huff that bad boy up and tote it on down there. And they like it. They like when we go across the Emerald Bridge, I tell them that's where I started at. And it was 65 feet to the water, and instead of walking all the way from one 70 or 80 foot, I would just jump across to the next one.
Yeah.
And that's crazy, I wouldn't do it now, or 10 years ago, I wouldn't do it, 20 years ago. But you did it, didn't keep from walking all the way around. Instead of walking up to the cap, getting down, walking across, just jump. It wasn't that far. You were young. But they like it, and they like to hear stories about it. They still ask about it, different things.
What's it like for you, Stephen?
Well, sort of the same thing. I mean, you obviously take pride in what you've done, and it is good. It's always interesting to drive across. In eastern North Carolina, there's very few places you can drive that you don't cross over a bridge that TA Lovin, myself, over the last 32 years has been involved in, or at least the company has been involved in. So you do have that sense of pride that, it started out with nothing there, or maybe there was an older bridge there and you put something across. So you get to, obviously, it's just like Barry said, I always tell my kids, I worked on this bridge, I worked on that bridge, whatever. But it's nice to leave something that will last for a while. It's certainly, most bridges are 50 to 75 year probably life expectancy of them. So they'll be around a long time after I'm gone. And that's, get some satisfaction out of that. And it's a thing, the pride in what you do, the craftsmanship that you put in it, those sort of things. You certainly have some pride or some expectation of what that should be and what other people are going to think about it, So that that sort of makes you feel good if you feel like you did a pretty good job. And I mean, over the years, we've tried to do quality work. You know, everything we do in the bridge side of things is something that somebody will see.
You're right.
There's very little bit of it that's covered up or that's buried or that's not exposed in some way. So you have to have some pride in what you do. And that's I always took pride in that.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is amazing the durability.
Yeah.
You know, you're talking about the bridge at Emerald Isle. That's at 55 years old now.
Yeah, and they work on it.
And-
Seemed like every year. They'll do something to it. When I went under it, pass under it, I look up and it's spalls underneath. Well, they're fixing all the spalls, and people saying that bridge is gonna fall down. No, that bridge ain't gonna fall down.
Yeah,
They're gonna fix it, and then they have a wreck, and somebody's towing a boat up there, and they knocked the boat and the trailer over to the intercoastal waterway. So they put up aluminum railing on it now.
right.
So
Right.
it didn't have that before.
Yeah.
It's just changes that I see they're doing, and they're for the better for sure.
Yeah. Well, expanding on that kind of general comment, how things have changed and how we build things over your time, and Stephen, yours, what would be the biggest thing that comes to mind about whether it's technology or the equipment we use or anything related to the process?
Well, safety is the main thing.
Yeah.
Safety has changed dramatically over the years. To be honest with you, the how things are done are pretty similar to where they used to be. Obviously, we do things with a lot less people. They had, I've heard stories of the guys that have, 20 people in the carpenter crew where we don't have 20 people on the entire job anymore. You really can't even find 20 people that, to put on the job anymore. So you're doing things with less people than you used to. Forming concrete is forming concrete. Now you might use a steel form where before it was wood, or you might build some different forms. But I mean, that sort of thing is sort of what it is. But safety-wise, it's changed dramatically.
Yeah.
The emphasis of safety, again, not that that's a bad thing. It's more in depth by a long shot than it used to be.
Right. The example that I was thinking about, you brought up surveying and how surveying alone has changed. The technology.
Now that industry has done a dramatic change.
It is
right.
fascinating to see that over the time. But you're right. The way it's built is essentially the way they've been built for many, many years.
That's correct. I mean, really, that's something that started probably, the Egyptians or whoever built the first structures. I mean, you had to support it somehow to get it in place, and then, that sort of thing. The surveying industry, you're right about that, from multiple people on a survey crew to now it's, GPS, where you went to robotic for a while. Most people are getting away from even robotic. They're going to GPS stuff.
Yeah.
So those sort of intricacies within the business have changed for sure. But the general principles of building it is, and really, we've got much more modern cranes and things than we had. But I mean, really, they do the same thing. They just pick stuff up and lower it, and it's just a little easier to do.
Right. As much as all that does change, it does get down. You mentioned it's down to people.
Correct.
And people have to show up and do difficult things on a daily basis in harsh conditions.
Yeah, and the probably the modernization of the equipment is in part because of lesser people available to do those sort of things.
Yeah, I agree.
And the innovation of just doing something different when it didn't exist.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
So you don't have the people, you figure out another way to do it.
Yeah.
So
I want to circle back a minute. We just talked about what's it like to see your work. So when you see your work, do you only have positive memories of it? Or are there some projects that when you see it, it just brings back all the frustration or exhaustion that you felt when dealing with a specific challenge on that bridge?
Yes, I would say you think of all that you put into that job and the people. You think about the people and how hard they work, and then you pour a deck. And then all of a sudden that night, it starts snowing. Well, you don't have it wrapped up. You could, most of the time, call around or get somebody to come and help you get the blankets and stuff out and get that bad boy covered up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But the most thing that's changed to me is like when I started, you laid your footers and your caps and everything, and there's about 100-foot tape and a framing square and a string line. And when the first time I ever seen Amazing Machine was Stephen brought it to the job, and I had a theodolite and a grade rod. And I said, he said, I'll go ahead and shoot the corners in for you. I said, you gonna do what? He said, I'm just gonna pinpoint the corners for you so you know where it's at. We had to put mud seals down. He'd shoot on the board where it needed to go.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that was like sliced bread, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Instead of pulling a string line in and trying to get that framing square and then a string line that or a chalk line, pop it, and then you had to measure. You just had a rule of tape in them. It was just hard. And then you didn't know if it was square or not, but you'd get over there after you got everything up and you put that framing square in there. And then you always drove back in the day, you always used double head 16s. Yeah. That way you could pull them and move it easy. You could get a crowbar. And when he come with that, oh man. But I kept the theodolite, the one I'd shoot the lines and stuff with, and he'd come check me out.
Yeah.
If he was doing something else, I'd go ahead and do it and the old way, and he'd come check it out. So it worked out good, but that was the biggest thing for me.
The things that you're talking about, do you remember from a job? I think you remember each one of them differently. The crazy stories, the things that happen, really, you always remember those, you know. I sort of reference time based on like vehicles I was driving. It's easy to remember I was driving a green one or a red one or whatever. So it's hard to, even my kids being born, I was driving this truck, so it had to be, no. But so you remember them differently, depends on what took place. You always remember, again, the crazy things that took place on them because, you know, people will try to tell you they're all the same. There's absolutely nothing that's the same about each one of them. They all have their own personalities. Like people, they all have their own personality. The environmental conditions, the what you're crossing, where you're working, the temperature, all of it's different. Again, the theory becomes the same on how you're doing it, but they're all different, and so you remember them differently. You remember a lot of times you'll have an incident with an employee that will come to memory every time you drive across. Oh yeah, this is when so and so did whatever. There'll be lots of different things like that pop into your head, and I think as time goes on, you remember them more fondly than you did at the time, because at the time it was work. And so you look back on it and you think of it in a more fond memory. But when you get down to really going through what took place, it was a lot of work, or it was, you know, there's very few jobs. It's sort of like a bell curve, obviously, work is. There's one or two over here that go completely in the ditch and you can't ever get them out. And there's one or two over here that go, you can't make a wrong decision, and then everything else falls somewhere in the middle of that bell curve.
Right. And
it just depends on the job, how that goes.
Yeah.
A lot of times it'll be weather conditions. We had a big snow while we were here, and we had to do whatever, or it got super cold and we had to put, you know, heaters up under the bridge or whatever that might have been. And that's sort of the way you remember it as you go across it. Oh yeah, I remember what happened here.
Yeah, and you didn't have the Weather Channel app back
No,
then either.
No, that's right. You come prepared to go to work, and if it rains, it looks like it's going to stay, you try to do the best decision you can. And always, when I was an hourly guy, I would sit in the tool trailer there in Currituck, and I was wondering, why in the world are they just not let us go home? Why can't we just, it's going to rain? And then when I became a superintendent, I hated to let people go home, because as soon as you let them go home, the sun pops out and you get right back to work. But now you have cell phone and ability to pull it up right there and say, oh, the cloud's going to move out in an hour and it's worth staying, or it's not worth staying. And so that's changed dramatically. Some for the good, some for the bad when it comes to that. You know, that sort of technology has changed the way people make decisions.
Right.
It's changed the way people take responsibility for their work. When you didn't have the ability to call somebody or to look at what the weather is, you had to make the best decision you could, and you moved on.
Yeah.
Now,
it wasn't the right one, was it?
No, a lot of times it wasn't. But now it's, well, I'll call somebody else up and see what they got to say, or it takes away in my mind from a lot of times of someone actually making the decision and moving on. Again, there's times when that's a bad thing, times when it's a good thing. So, but that's changed dramatically. But how you remember things is basically what took place on the job in my mind. That's the way I do, whether it's talking with people or dealing with those personnel or what transpired on that job.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened. We're talking about snow. That's how I come in contact with Mr. John Lovin. I was 23 years old. And Mr. Trimble had told me, he said, no, I don't know when we'll get back. He said, but I live right there at the job at a trailer park. Close to, I could walk to work.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Trimble said to me, he said, Barry, I want you to keep the snow off the deck. So when the carpenters come, and I'm thinking, how am I supposed to keep that snow off that deck? And he said, just keep the air compressor fueled up and blow the snow off. He said, no, by the way, if we don't get back, the cofferdams on the other side and the low water footers, they were on land, but they filled up with water.
Mm-hmm.
He said, there's pumps over there. I want you to keep them running and fueled up. So it was cold too, boy. I think it snowed 2 or 3 different times there. So I got up that morning, they're like going to work. I went and blowed the deck off, and I didn't hear that pump on the other side running. I said, well, I better go check that. Boy, I hope that thing ain't out of fuel because it's hard to get started back.
Yeah.
So when I got over there, I seen a man standing over there beside a Lincoln Continental, or it was a Cadillac. I can't remember which one it was. It was one of them two, with the trunk up. And I said, I got to go here and run this guy off, because you didn't want nobody on your jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I was told, if you see anybody, don't let them get hurt, run them off the job.
Yeah.
That was going to be Wilson.
Huh?
That was going to be Wilson. That you saw with the Lincoln, probably.
No, that was John Lovin.
Oh, I got you.
That was John's. Come to find out,
Yeah.
the pump wasn't running. He had cut it off and checked the oil in it.
Oh, okay.
He told me, he said, I already checked that pump. I said, I got to check it.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir, but I don't trust you. I'm going to check it
I said,
for
I
myself.
really got to check it. He said, you know who I am? I said, I sure don't. I said, I sure don't. He said, I'm John Lovin. When he said the Lovin part, I said, hey, how you doing, sir? I said, Mr. Trimble wanted me to check these pumps and keep them running while the snow's on the ground and get it ready for when all the men come back, make sure that it's pumped out, they go to work. And that was it wasn't long, but he said, well, do your job then.
Yeah.
He said, he must have a lot of reliance in you there. He said, he must trust you. I said, I hope he does. He said, well, I can tell him when I see him.
Yeah.
And
That's good.
That's
That's a
the only
good
time I
story.
see him. Yeah.
That's you learn one of those untold rules of construction. You never want to be the person that lives closest to the job.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived about from here to the road in a trailer park, and I was always the man. Look after this, look after that,
Yeah.
make sure the barricades are up. But that was all right.
Well, it's such a good, it's so important. So when the workforce does show up,
They go
they're
right
ready
to
to
work.
go. They're not having to wait. to
That's
blow
and that's
the
what he
deck
wanted. He
off
said,
or-
keep that snow off, Barry.
Because we've all shown up to a cofferdam and it's full of water. Well, everybody's standing around for half a day at that point. And that's, it's.
Yeah, I remember one time we were up in Woodbridge, Virginia, and we left a guy there to keep the cofferdam pumped out all night so we could go to work next morning. Mr. Trimble drove up and the pump wasn't running. The man had an alarm clock to wake him up to check the pump. Well, it was off and the cofferdam was full. Before anybody got there, I'd have run the battery down. I'd have done something. But Mr. Trimble went over there and no fuel in it or nothing.
Oh my.
He did. He said a few choice words, I think, and that was about the end of it. Got everything pumped out, went to work. But that didn't ever happen no more neither. But he was I tell you that, Mr. Trimble, he was a fair man. If he give you $10, he'd give me $10.
Yeah.
He was just fair.
Uh-huh.
If he got on you, he got on the whole crowd.
Right.
He didn't just pinpoint you. Why didn't you help him? Or, you seen it. You've been here longer than he has, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, Barry, I want to go back. We talked a few minutes ago. Steven said we were talking about not having a Weather Channel app, so you didn't know what was happening with the weather. What other challenges did you face in the early days of the bridges?
Well, after I made foreman, I made that in Newbern when we done the Newbern job there. I wanted to tell you that anyway. Mr. Trimble was in charge of it for a while till Wilson Twyford got there. And I didn't know him, and he didn't know me much. But first thing he said to me is when he seen me, he said, I get here at 6 o'clock of the morning, and I leave at 6 o'clock in the evening, and you're the gate man. Close the gate and open the gate. I'm thinking, I'd like to go home too, But I said, yes, sir, no problem. So, and the last time he pulled up there, I wasn't a foreman, I was a carpenter then. And he pulled up there, I don't know how long I opened that thing up, a long time. He said, well, today's your last day. You need to find somebody to open this gate and everything. He said, I talked to all the foremen on the job. They say you're the man for the next foreman. And he made me foreman there.
Oh, that's good.
So
That's a good
I
story.
picked the guy I didn't like the best. He was the gate man then.
Yeah. That's a good story, though.
Yeah.
Is that how
That's
you
neat.
got picked to be the gate man, or did you just set a new tradition?
Mr. Trimble, we just had not no run-ins or nothing, but I would always say, good morning, Mr. Trimble, and he'd say good morning quick. He had a quick good morning. And he invited me. I wasn't a foreman or anything. He invited me to go up to where he lived in Virginia. And I didn't go for 4th of July.
Oh.
And I told Wilson about it, and he said, you're the wind. I said, why? I don't know him. He said, well, he invited you. He sees something in you. So the next year he asked me again. I said, yes, sir, I'll go, 4th of July. Well, when you go to see him,
Yeah.
you're on a schedule. He's got everything scheduled out. And we were supposed to see Crystal Gale sing at the fair.
Oh, yeah.
We got there, put our chairs down. And he said, let's go over here and buy a raffle ticket on a Statler Brothers guitar signed. I'm thinking, I don't know guitar, to myself. I don't. So he said, how about a lemonade? So we went over there and got a lemonade. And he bought one and gave it to me. I said, Mr. Trimble, you going to get a lemonade? He said, no, I don't drink that stuff. And I'm thinking, then it looked, and he gave me 3 tickets. He had bought 3 tickets for the raffle on the guitar. But Crystal Gill was running a little late. And we had our chairs there, and we were sitting there, and, he'd look at that watch. All of a sudden, he said, we got to go. I got steaks to cook.
So you never saw Crystal Gale?
We left the fair.
It was time to go.
But we really enjoyed it. He showed me pictures of when he flew over the mountains. You remember during the war, and it had so much load on them. Half of them didn't make it across the mountain because they were carrying so much. And he showed me pictures of that, and then just different things. And his wife, they didn't have any children. I had 2 kids. Oh man, she was in there holding them and telling them stories in the bed, and he's a good guy. Once I learned him a little bit, but look, let me tell you, he's a different dude on the job. He wanted it done right.
Yeah.
I could go on, but just because I went to see him, that didn't mean nothing.
Well, it probably meant something. You just didn't get special treatment.
Yeah, he didn't give you no special treatment there. I'd done a couple of things he didn't really like. I'd like to tell you sometime when we got time to tell you. Back when we were in Newbern, he just made me foreman. And I'd never worked on a cofferdam, but it was made just square. Mm-hmm. It was just square, great, big enough to sit over the pile and pump it out. It sit in the mud.
Yeah.
Like a
He
moving
said,
one.
he gave me a drawing, and he took it, and he come down to where I was at. And he said, the welders come out of Goldsboro at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you have to watch them welders now. They'll try to change something. I said, yes, sir. He said, do it just like this paper now. If you don't, it ain't going to work. I said, yes, sir, I got it. So I showed it to Kuntz. I'll never forget his name. He wanted to do it different. I said, no, Mr. Trump said, do it just like this. When you build a box, it's got to go up and down to the top to the bottom. He said, why can't we just go straight across? I said, that's not what this plan says, and that's the way Mr. Trump wanted it. Well, it happens to make a long story short. I was going up there to the office to get something. I was walking, and Mr. Trimble met me halfway. He's coming down to see how it was going. He said, well, Barry, how's it going? I said, it's going good. We're going good. And he said, well, you doing it like the paper? I said, well, not exactly like the paper. I said, so I drawed it on the ground and drawed it, and I said, we're going straight across. Boy, he took his foot in the race what I was drawing. He said, let me tell you something right now. When I tell you to do something, I want you to do it and do it the way I told you to do it. He said, I said, but Kuntz, he said, Kuntz is just a welder. He said, I'm going to be back down there in 15 minutes. And you tell Kuntz to get it off if he has to eat it off. Boy, he done put fear of God in me by then, you know. I walked on there, I said, Kuntz, I said, you got it. Why? Who said so? I said, Mr. Trimble said so. He said, you better have it off in 15 minutes and back like it's supposed to be going, and he'll be back in 15 minutes. We were ready for him when he come back. We was already welding it back, but I didn't do that no more.
Yeah.
None of that, and nobody else did. I should have done it, but I was just greenhorn, you know.
Yeah.
I'd listen to the welder.
You know, it's interesting because in one of the conference rooms there is a detail drawing of one he
Right.
did for a cofferdam, I believe. It's interesting seeing the detail, and
Yeah.
it's neat to have that kind of.
And you had those lifting eyes. You just pick it up with the crane, move it to the next bench, seat it down, we had a drop hammer, and you just bump it down.
Right.
And then it seal itself.
Yeah.
They could go to work on that. But it was good.
Yeah.
I didn't do that no more, by the way. Yeah.
Fail forward.
Yeah. Like I say, he didn't cuss me. He didn't do anything like that to me. But I've heard him say a few syllables. But he was all right with me, and I enjoyed it. And I must have been doing things right because I stayed there 50 years. You know, I never missed a check.
Yeah.
I never got laid off. So I could look for that check to come. I didn't even know there was when they went to war, you know, and all the car lots were folding up and all that stuff in Jacksonville. Wasn't many people, all the Marines were gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't know no different because I was getting the same money every week.
Right.
Or every month.
Yeah.
And that was the difference. And I tell everybody, I said, you need, they say, that's hard to believe you worked there 50 years. I said, I've worked there 50 years.
Yeah.
I said, I've had more trucks than most car lots.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was good work, wasn't
Yeah.
bad work. Hard work, but not
Yeah.
bad.
I agree.
I knew I had somewhere to go 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And when they went to 40 hours, I thought I was on a holiday. You know, still had to work some
Yeah.
later, but it was regular 45 hours. But you could save that 5 hours, base your bills on the 40 hours, and save the 5
Yeah.
hours overtime, and that's what I did.
Right.
All those years, you know. I didn't say I'd saved every cent of it, but it helped.
Yeah.
You see, back then you could run a tugboat.
Right.
Yeah.
We all
Yeah.
did that, yeah.
Yeah, and we had a tugboat, but it was called we had one called Swamp Fox, and it would look like a banana boat, and it had one lever down here,
Mm-hmm.
and we had an operator in it. I'll never forget it. He was carrying. He would load the service barges up, little barges, with steel or whatever, and carry it to the job and push it out there. Well, he was just talking on the radio to somebody, you know, and That thing vibrated bad. And the handle worked itself out and fell down. It just flopped down like that. And
Yeah.
he had a habit of running right up to the barge and throwing reverse and put all the fuel to her. He couldn't find the lever. he bent the pushers in just like that.
Oh.
Knocked everybody down on the barges. But just stuff. I told Donna, I said, I'd like to write a book about it and be able to tell it. Somebody could write it in shorthand from when I started to what I can remember.
Yeah.
Because once you start, you can remember it in.
Right.
You know. But it was good times.
All right, Ty, we're going to switch over to you for just a minute. TA Loving Company has built bridges over historic sites like Selma, Alabama. What does the historical significance of that mean to TA Loving Company?
Well, that's a great question. I think about a lot of the jobs we've talked about today. The Emerald Isle Bridge. There so many people have used those bridges. It just so happens some of the bridges we had an impact or impacted that we've done were part of history. And but I think what it tells me is it's kind of a focus on the history of the company and how long we've been in business and how many different areas we've worked in. And Barry and Stephen have talked about different areas that they've worked in and the influence the company's had and building things that matter and that are so critical to the needs of the areas we work in. So I think that's what I think about when you mention jobs like that.
Yeah, it really does bring the history of the company in alignment with the history of the U.S.
Yeah, it really does.
And when we built these bridges, it was access to islands. And
Right.
people couldn't get there except by ferry or whatever. And I think that was the most important thing, that Mr. John or whoever had that vision that them people got to get to Emerald.
They got to get there.
And they got to get to Alligator River and all that, over to Manio. And I said, somebody had a vision there. And
Yeah.
then like I watched a podcast, Sam talking about Mr. Bryant coming to work. And then that just expanded it, he built homes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got into building hospitals and stuff. And I listened to the whole thing and watched it. My wife said, "You in a trance?" I said, "No, I'm just listening." It's interesting to me too.
Very much.
Yeah, that is so true. For so many of those areas, you think about the number of people that live on, across those bridges that you had no
That's
access
right.
to.
They had no access to.
Yeah.
It.
The economic impact that
Yeah.
the bridge had on
It is huge.
on that area. Yeah, absolutely.
Before we transition to talk about the future, what else is important for us to discuss about the history or the past of bridges?
Well, to me, I would say it's important for us to remember the guys that came before me. I always wanted, as I was working, to make sure they would be proud of what I was doing. And so that's important to me. There's, again, a lot of really smart, hardworking, intelligent people that spend a lot of time here in the industry in general, but a lot of time with TA11 specifically, that you want even their family to be proud that TA11 was involved in what was going on. And so that's, to me, would be what I would want people to remember, too, is all those people that came before. The John Levins, the Red Trimbles, the Wilson Twyfords, the Tommy Dowdys, Ted LaCasio, those people.
Yeah.
Taught myself a lot. I know taught Barry a lot. David Parks and Dean Montgomery and Tim Bailey. Those folks did a lot of work and deserve to be recognized in some way.
They really built a solid foundation for us
They
to
did.
work from.
Absolutely
Yeah.
did. And grabbed the bull by the horns when it wasn't easy and figured it out.
Yeah.
Another thing, them guys he's talking about, they didn't live where we lived. They lived like down at 3 hours away
Mm-hmm.
on the other side of Little Washington,
Yeah, Columbia.
Columbia, and all
Yeah.
them places. They would drive back and forth every day with a carload.
Yeah.
And them were your steel tires, your concrete finisher. They were all mixed, but
Yeah.
one guy would buy a new car and they'd wear it out. And then,
Yeah.
you know, they'd pay him so much a week to
Right.
drive it. And that was always amazing to me that they'd be there every morning, you know. And my hat was off to him, old Bubba. He was a good guy too, I tell you. They were hard to beat. A lot of them guys would look after you. Bring you a sandwich. I seen what you eat yesterday. You know,
Yeah.
didn't eat a lot on the job, but, you know, and they'd bring you a sandwich or something. My wife fixed this or that.
Yeah.
It was just sit down together and eat up on the bridge. You didn't go to a restaurant or nothing.
What people were willing to do to keep a job was dramatically different than it is today. I mean, I was a little before my time, but I've heard the stories and I've seen the crane. We had a crane operator they would drop him off on the barge Monday morning and they'd pick him up Friday evening. He would stay out there all week long. He had a cot that folded down over top the motor.
His name was Luke.
Yeah, he would live in the back of the crane all week, not get off the barge at all. On the end of Friday, he'd come in back in and go home.
Mm.
That's dedication.
Yeah.
He run the 54B and he one of those.
He ran the lime, I know.
Yeah, he run that too.
Yeah.
But he had one of those personnel baskets for a bed.
Yeah.
He'd fold that bad boy up in the day and work,
Mm-hmm.
and let it down at night and get in it, and it was off the ground, and that's what he slept in.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, try to promote that and get somebody to come today and do that.
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's hard to get people to work overtime today,
That's
let
correct.
alone get them to stay all week.
It's just different, and that mentality is different. The need and the want to do that. It's not we've not sacrificed at all in the United States in a long time, and those people had to sacrifice, and they knew it, and a job was very important to them.
Right.
And so the company benefited from those sort of people that were willing to do whatever it took.
Yeah.
I went on from then. I never seen 27 people here trying to get a job at one time. You know, I've seen that over the years. I said, it's just falling off. And I can remember if he come to the job and I looked at him and he had a toolbox, I could mostly tell you what he could do and what he couldn't do. And I could hire him right then, fill out the paperwork in my truck. He's gone to work.
Yeah.
But it ain't that easy no more,
Yeah.
No.
you know. And you got a lot of good people.
Yeah.
Stephen, your story about Luke is a good transition into the future. So what advice would you give to current or future builders or engineers entering this field?
Well, my advice to certainly engineers or people in this industry is get out and actually put your hands on it. It's always good to have the knowledge of a degree. I've got a degree myself. Went to college. Had my kids both have degrees. That's something positive to have. Nobody can take it from you, but there's no better experience than putting your hands on it and actually understanding what it takes to do it. I think the industry as a whole suffers from the lack of actual practical knowledge, not just in the bridge world, but in the construction world in general. I think what we saw over the years was people worked their way up to those higher positions where now they come out of school, they expect to have those higher positions, and rightfully so. But and I think with the lack of personnel coming into the industry, they're able to get those positions, but the practical knowledge of it is lacking in the industry, and that's something that we should all be telling kids: don't be afraid to get your hands dirty.
Right.
Go put some vocational classes back in high schools and things, and let them get exposed to those things when they're younger, and see if they're even interested. And so those sort of things would help industry considerably, in my mind. That would be the big thing I would say is just don't be afraid to get out and go get dirty for a little while, sweat a little bit, learn a lot.
Yeah. Learn the business.
Learn the business. That's right.
Yeah.
And the business is not only the contractual end; it's
Yeah.
the actual doing end.
Yeah.
There's
I
a
agree.
vast difference between education and experience.
Absolutely.
And education
Yeah.
is important, but it's experience that allows you to continue progressing and moving forward.
Right.
Correct.
How about you, Barry? What advice do you have for those coming in?
My advice to them is just you'll know in a little bit if you try it. You don't just say you've seen somebody and boy he had a hard road to hoe there. He worked construction with that. Of course you're gonna have a hard road to hoe, but it's what you make it. It's what you make it. I'm telling you, if you're willing to get your hands dirty, like Stephen says, you'll do all right. People will see your potential. The upper echelon I'm talking about. They'll see it.
Mm-hmm.
And when they do, they won't forget it, that you done this and you done that. And he was there when I needed him. I called him at night and he went down and checked something out for me to see if it was okay. I lived an hour and a half away and he lived right there, but he didn't mind going.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what I tell my grandson too, don't wait and do stuff that you really don't enjoy and it's going to fade out. I said, like TA11, I knew when I went to TA11 that I had a job. All I had to do was work and learn something and show up. And I tell him the same thing. I said, you're a good prospect for TA11 because you're computer savvy and you're a hard worker. Because we kept him most of the time when he was always at Papa's wanting to know what we're going to do today.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. I worked all week here Saturday. But he was a hard worker, and I told him, don't wait till it's too late. I know you don't want to leave home a little bit. They don't like to leave home now.
Yeah.
And it was a must, and I didn't mind it. Of course, back then we took our families with us, and the company would move us and find a trailer park. You paid the lot rent, and then they got where they'd pay the lot rent. That was great. But they had fixed up a truck to pull it so they wouldn't have to pay a trailer mover. You just had to be ready when you got there.
Yeah.
But it was all good. I have no regrets. I don't have not one regret about anything that I've done with the A11. They were good to me, and I said I was good to them, I think.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank both of y'all for being with us. Barry, thank you for your time here. Stephen, thank you for your time and your continued time here.